a pretty simple message, which is if you don't touch them, there's no risk. Where'd you go? So they like to snuggle up in little hidey holes because that's what they'd be doing in the wild, and depending what species you have. So this little guy likes to roost in tree hollows and occasionally house behind people's walls. No. He's like, no, I know that the entire internet is behind that phone, so I'm going to hide away. Right. Where'd you go? So I'm going to pop him away and show you some of my flying foxes. Now, in America, you wouldn't have flying foxes. You would only have these little insectivorous bats. So, hang on, let me just pop my little guys away.
If you're just tuning in, we're in Sydney, Australia today with Sarah Curran. And these guys are hanging out, literally. So, how big are these guys?
So these are one of the largest bat species in the world. They're the grey-headed flying fox, and they're also a threatened species, which existence are threatened by habitat destruction and climate change, and also humans. But they can get as big as 1 kilo, and their wingspan can be as big as 1.3 meters, which is absolutely huge.
Wow.
Yeah. They're not the largest species in the world, but they're one of the largest species in the world. Now, these, again, they're all rescue animals, and the person that's just come up to see me came into care a couple of weeks ago, and she was attacked by a powerful owl. So she's undergoing therapy to treat her wounds, which are all through her body. So the owls, or sometimes you might see a sea eagle, which there are a few really good videos online of sea eagles that capture the bats in flight. So you get holes through the wings, but it also goes really deep into the bodies. Yeah. Are you going to have something or not?
How did you get into rescuing bats?
So I got into rescuing bats about 8 years ago, and I took some time off university studies. So I'm actually a physiotherapist, or physical therapist for everybody in the States. And I wasn't doing anything with my life, so I thought that I would join a volunteer rescue organisation. And I met a bat at the initial course, and I fell in love. I guess I didn't know much about bats, so for me it was quite eye-opening to know that we had such incredible animals living in Sydney, Australia, and that they were vitally important to the environment. They all serve really unique individual and unique roles. The grey-headed flying fox is responsible for long-distance pollination and seed dispersal of native hardwoods along the east coast of Australia. So at night time, they spend all night traveling really, really large distances, and they get pollen from eucalyptus or gum trees, as you might more commonly know them as. And the pollen attaches to their fur, and they travel long distances, and that's how they cross-pollinate the trees, which is pretty cool. So they're basically massive bees. They do the same job. Now, they are, like I said, they are wild animals, and you might see, for those of you who do follow my page already, you might see pictures or videos of some of the bats that live up at the Walkabout Park, and they're unreleasable bats, and they're much more humanised. They've come into care for various reasons where they can't be released, and so that's why I'm not interacting in the same way with these bats. And it's really important to know the difference and treat them appropriately, like they're going to be released back into the wild, which is essentially where they belong. So the other guys up the, oh, see, yeah, she's like, no, go away, get away from me. I tried to feed them some grapes, but the fact that I'm standing here talking is probably a little bit stressful. The other bats that are in here have come into care from large aperture fruit tree netting. So it's not uncommon for for people in the leafy suburbs of Sydney to want to have fruit trees in their backyard, most commonly figs or stone fruits. And when they start to ripen, people like to protect their backyard fruit trees, which is fair enough. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't know that having the large aperture, so mesh that has really big holes in it, is frightfully dangerous for wildlife. And when bats' native food source, well, the flying foxes, these guys, their food source is in short supply, they come down and they raid the backyard fruit trees, and they get entangled, and it causes really, really, really hideous, hideous damage. So it's important, take-home message, if you do want to have backyard fruit trees, make sure it's really fine mesh like fly screen, so that it doesn't entangle and cause hideous injuries to fruit bats and also other animals as well.
We have a few questions coming in, if you don't mind me asking. Wendy wants to know if they get out of the cages at all.
Sorry?
Wendy asks if they get out of the cages at all. Like, do they get out of the cages much, or do they stay in cages the whole time while you're rehabilitating them?
No, while I'm rehabilitating them, I keep them in a cage because they're wild animals. Even if they're really sick and badly injured, they can still take off and fly away. And particularly with treatments such as for when they've been constricted in fruit tree netting, the injuries can take some time to come out. So it's really important that we do keep them in care for the appropriate amount of time so that they can completely rehabilitate from their injuries. And this is just one stage of the setup. So this does seem like a very small cage, but this is like hospital cage. This is like bed rest for them. And we do have a facility where they then go outdoors into a more intermediate, maybe a 3x3 meter, I don't know what that is in feet, sorry, aviary, where they can start to stretch and build back up their muscle strength. And that's a critical part of their rehabilitation process, that they do get adequate flight fitness before they get released, because they essentially have to be, they're athletes, and when they get released, in order to be able to fend for themselves, they need to be fit again, just like you wouldn't expect a marathon runner to go out and do a marathon after they've sprained their ankle and done no rehabilitation. It's the same thing. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
So no, they're enclosed while they're in rehabilitation, and they go through a process of stages depending on their injuries.
And Kira asks, well, this is for people that are just tuning in, but well, you've probably answered this already, but Kara asks, are you planning to release them after rehabilitation? And then the second part is, what is their normal lifespan?
That's a great question. So again, for those who've just tuned in, I've got a couple of different species of bats. The ones that I'm showing you in the cage are grey-headed flying foxes, which are large fruit-eating bats that you wouldn't have in America. And they can live up to 25, 26 years. That's human years. But sadly, due to all the threats that they face, their life expectancy in the wild is maybe about 7 years old. And that's mainly due to human-related interference and climate change. So when the weather gets really hot, some of you may have heard, because it did go viral, but when the temperatures go beyond 43 degrees, bats can no longer provide themselves with the cooling mechanisms to cool their bodies down and their organs, and they just drop out of the trees. And we're finding that bats are getting themselves into less and less suitable habitats due to human interference. So they're less equipped to deal with rises in temperature, because a lot of the places that they go into lack that microclimate, which would otherwise enable them to cool themselves. So it's a really difficult situation that they're in, and that's why their numbers are in decline. Sorry, I went a little bit more into detail in response to your relatively simple question. Sorry.
No worries. We can always use more information. I think that's about it for questions. If you have anything
Awesome.
else you wanted to add.
No, I guess it's really important that people understand how unique and diverse bat species across the world are. In Australia alone, we have over 85 different species of bats, 4 of which are flying foxes, these being one of them. But across the world, they're really, really important for the environment. The little bats that I showed you before, they can eat over half their body weight in insects and other pest species per night. I went to a conference the other week, the Australasian Bat Society conference, and I heard a great talk from Heidi, who was looking at Australia and the effects of microbats on cotton eating bugs, and she's been able to prove that they do actually eat a significant portion of pest species, not just native bugs, which is pretty exciting. And I know in the US they're responsible for major agricultural services from the pests that they eat. I think in the trillions of dollars in agricultural service the little microbats do. And the flying foxes, they pollinate our trees and disperse seeds over massive, massive different distances. So it's important that we know that and that we learn to respect bats, because I think that they are worthy of our respect. And if you're interested in more, if you have more questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So just get in touch and give us a follow and a like. Cool.
Very cool. We will post a link in the top comment if you're interested in learning more about Sarah's work and about Sydney Wildlife and how you can help out with donations. Thanks so much to Sarah. And thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you for having me.